Welcome to Got Grass, conversations with the legends and leaders of Bluegrass. You've enjoyed live Bluegrass at Guitar Town CT concerts in Hampton, Connecticut since 2008. From Tony Rice, Rouse Stanley, and Doyle Lawson to Tim O'Brien, Sierra Hall, and Billy Strings. Now you can go behind the scenes as we chat with your favorite Bluegrass stars. I'm your podcast host, Chris Worth. So I'm very happy to welcome Maddie Denton to Got Grass. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
First things first, is Maddie your full given name, or is that a nickname, or shouldn't I ask?
Oh, no, I love that question. My name is actually Madison.
Madison.
So it's not Madeline or Madeline, which is also pretty. But yeah, it's Madison. But everybody calls me Maddie from as far as I can remember, except for in the first grade when I went through a little time of wanting to be called Madison. But tried to change my name back to Madison in the first grade, and I started writing that on all of my papers. But then that just didn't fit.
Give that up. It's funny because I find my name is Christopher, and I was only called that when I was in trouble by my mom. Otherwise, it was Chris. But if you get the full name, you know something's going on.
Yes, especially the middle name too.
Oh, that's serious trouble.
I had really messed up then.
Yeah. So what's a perfect day off for you if you ever get one these days? Do you ever get time off where you just hang and do what you want?
A little bit. We stay pretty busy with East Nash Grass. We travel a lot. We're touring a lot, and I love being on the road, so that kind of works out perfect. But my ideal day off, I've been trying to do a little bit more writing. So, and I find a lot of it helps me to write with other people sometimes. So I've been writing a lot with Brenna McMillan, who you just had on this podcast, and we've been, she's doing some really, really great stuff. She's got a bunch of songs that she's written that she recorded and put out on her recent record that everybody should go check out, called Dear Life. But she and I have been writing a lot together and just hanging out together. And so I think a good day off would be spent with the people that I care about, and maybe trying to be creative if possible, or not. But I just think friends are so important, and hanging out with other people that inspire you sounds like a perfect day off for me.
I thought you were going to say golf.
I do love to play golf, and I've been playing a little bit here and there, and, but I played so much golf, throughout my life. I'm kind of a fair weather golfer these days. And so, but I would play. That sounds like a lot of fun. It'd be fun to go out with my dad and play golf. We were supposed to do that last month, and things got hectic, and I told him we'd play, and we need to go play. So you know what? I think I revised my statement. Now that you've put a good idea in my head, I think a good day would be spent playing golf with my dad.
So what is it about writing with Brenna or another writer that you enjoy as opposed to writing just by yourself? Is it just hard to sometimes get ideas completed by yourself, or?
Yeah, I think I second guess a lot of things, and I wonder if it's even good at all. I'll come up with something and I'm like, this isn't even good at all. And then I just will trash it and not give it a chance. And I'm pretty hard on myself that way. I've always been kind of a perfectionist, in school and in sports and music. I did a lot of fiddle contests growing up, and, I am a perfectionist, but I think working with other people that I trust and look up to they can balance me out a little bit and say, like, hey, don't be so hard on yourself. That's like, there's something there. We can work with that. So it's nice to have somebody balance me out.
She seems like she'd be. I mean, I know she's written some great songs. She's quite an interesting woman, as I'm sure you are from what I've heard about you. It's funny because her podcast, which was just a week ago, and I've done 49 podcasts, hers is now number two of all of them after only a week, only behind
Wow.
Brian Sutton. It's amazing. I don't know. She must have the best social media, whatever,
She's
in the
pretty
world.
savvy with that social media.
Yeah,
Um, but no, that's awesome. I'm glad hers is having a lot of success.
it is.
Great
Yeah.
to hear.
So a lot of the bluegrass players I talked to on this podcast grew up in family bands. A lot of them started touring when they were 5 or 6 and singing before they could even play. Um, a lot of them said that they didn't really choose bluegrass. It kind of was just what was there and was kind of expected, and they just fell into it because that was just what their life was.
Sure.
Was that like that for you? I know you've done a lot of stuff. You said fiddle contest. I know you played Texas style fiddle a lot, but what was your path like to from a young kid into bluegrass? Kind of briefly, if you could summarize
Yeah.
that.
So I started playing the fiddle when I was 5 years old. My mom also plays the fiddle, and her dad played the fiddle. So I'm a third generation, and but it was never forced. Um, my parents bought a fiddle, little tiny fiddle, uh, when I was 5, and they said, here it is, and here's its location in the closet. You can go get it at any time, whenever you want to, or if you never want to, that's fine, but it's here. And I went and got it. And I started trying to figure it out, and mom started kind of helping me, and then they got me into private lessons when I was 5, and so I started, really kind of getting serious. I loved it immediately, and I didn't necessarily love to practice, but the perfectionist in me, I did grow up competing in fiddle contests, and I always wanted to do well in those because I'm so competitive. So yeah, I just started playing in fiddle contests when I was 7, and bluegrass was always around at these competitions. It wasn't just fiddle contests. It's, they have mandolin and guitar, and so I'd mess around and enter the uh, other instrument contests too. But fiddle has always been my main thing. I also enjoyed playing tenor guitar and backing up the other fiddle contestants. Uh, but bluegrass was always around, and I didn't really understand it. And I certainly didn't know how to play in the key of B. I mean, fiddle, traditional, like Southeastern style fiddles, keys are kind of G, D, and A, and occasionally E, but never B. There's not a contest style tune that's in B. And so that was a total mystery to me how to play in the key of B until I started working a little bit with my good Texas style friend, Megan Lynch Chowning, who had started out as a Texas style fiddler and then kind of made the transition to bluegrass that I was hoping to make, but very intimidated by. And she just explained things to me in a way that opened up all the doors that I'd felt like I'd closed myself, probably. It just didn't feel open to me because I didn't understand how to play bluegrass. I didn't understand the ins and outs of it. And so Megan really, really helped me. And I try to, when I get asked to teach workshops, I always teach the thing that Megan taught me, which is this idea of the fiddle capo, because other instruments have capos that they just slap on and they can play in whatever key they want to, and it seems like it's G. Uh, which fiddle, we don't have a capo, but if you can rewire your brain a little bit to think about your fingers as the capo, and I teach that in workshops everywhere I go because I want to spread that word to everybody who is a little bit intimidated by bluegrass or just the key of B or improvising in general. It's more accessible than it seems, and everyone can do it.
It's very interesting. I hadn't heard that theory. I'm not a fiddle. I play guitar, and I teach a couple of bluegrass classes. I was forced to learn mandolin recently because there wasn't a mandolin in one of the classes. So I know the mandolin or fiddle is similar, except we have frets and you don't.
Right.
And mandolin players don't usually use capos. I know it's okay, but most of them don't. But so I was asking, I was going to ask you about the key of B because I find that on a mandolin also very challenging compared to D, A, C, D, and G.
Yeah.
What about now? Do you when you're playing in B with say your band or with Dan Tyminski, are you still thinking in the back of your head, wow, this is a key I used to not know how to play, and or is it just come as naturally as other keys now? You don't think
Well,
about it.
I started playing music, or well, playing bluegrass. Um, I started kind of dipping my toes into it in high school, but I wasn't very good at it. So I gave that a little bit of a break, and I actually studied jazz at MTSU, Middle Tennessee State University. I was a jazz studies major for a year, um, until I decided to get a degree in biology and teach kids. But so I looked at improvising as from a jazz point of view. I actually took lessons with the trumpet professor at MTSU, the jazz trumpet professor, and he would play his trumpet and he would say, Can you play that back to me? And we were just trying to figure out, you know, how to take private lessons that way. And I did that for a year, and I learned so much about improvising. And then when I was able to take lessons with, I took a couple lessons with Megan Lynch that I was talking about, and she had this fiddle capo idea, and so I've been doing the fiddle capo thing since about college, and so it's starting to become ingrained in me now, and I don't think about like, oh, this is a scary thing that I used to could not do. I've just worked at it and I've practiced and I've learned theory. I'm not at the level that I need to know it, but I've started getting into it more and wanting to understand theory, as opposed to when I was a little bit younger. I didn't want to learn and it seemed a lot like math, which I'm not very good at math, but I'm realizing the more that I dive into music, the more theory that I need to know, and that it only limits me to not know theory. So and you can get on YouTube, and there are videos on there of people that start from the very beginning of music theory and go all the way through, and you can learn theory. Um, I just want everyone to know that improvising and theory and playing solos is accessible to everyone. It's scary feeling, but it's the information's out there.
Yeah. I mean, bluegrass, like most what you call folk type music, is basically
Hmm.
learned by ear and always was. A lot of the great legendary players couldn't read music and had no need to, know theory.
Right.
You knew the chords, you knew the melody, you could hear it, you could play it. That was all you needed. Harmony, same way, you know how to stack a harmony. It just was just from singing in church or whatever. But
Hmm.
I agree with you. Yeah, I mean, I think it's some people are kind of scared by theory. They think, it's going to screw up their playing or make them too mechanical or too classical. But you're
Right.
right. The more you know about what you're doing, I can't see it hurting you. I mean, you're still going to play the
No.
same way. You're just going to know what you're doing, kind of.
Yeah.
It's
And I
interesting.
Yeah, this idea of like fingerboard fluency of just knowing why what you're playing works. And I don't necessarily know it. I'm not just getting buried or lost in that, you know, while I'm taking a solo like on stage with East Nash Grass or something. Like I'm still thinking about it, but I also want to just create and play. So, and I think practicing is really important for everyone, but especially when you're just starting to get into wanting to improvise more. I think learning scales is so important. That's something that I learned at Middle Tennessee State University. we learned the bebop scales. I mean, that was the first thing that we learned. And they said, learn these in all 12 keys. Everything that we did was in all 12 keys, which some of that was easier than others. A flat, not super fun, but that's a common key in jazz, or E flat. Yes, like I was having to
All
play.
the horn keys are difficult for certain instruments like fiddle, and they're not natural.
Right. Yeah. But then you've got guys like Eddie Barbash that are super, super cool,
Yep.
that play horn and are or play the saxophone, and he's into fiddle tunes. And so if listeners, if y'all haven't checked out Eddie Barbash and what he's been working on, it's really impressive. He's played with Sierra Hull a little bit, and like he just appreciates fiddle tunes on the saxophone, which is in a way different key. And I don't even know how that all translates, but it's pretty impressive. And I appreciate that horn players want to learn folk music. I think that's very cool.
It's
Good
nice to
music
see.
is good music, you know?
Yes, thank you, Duke Ellington. That's what he said. It's either good music or bad music. It doesn't really matter what else you call it. It's good or
Yeah.
it's bad. And I think
Yeah.
that's very important to know that, all kinds of music are great if they're great, and it's good to be exposed. Eddie Barbash played here. I'm trying to think. I think he was playing with maybe Jeff Picker's band at one point, and I was blown
Yeah.
away by they did like, I don't know, like Salt Creek or something. It was just like, oh my God, on saxophone, how can you possibly do that in the key
Yeah.
of A? Yes, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I enjoy being around people that think about music in a different way, and inspire me to do the same. Uh, when East Nash Grass travels down the road, it's rare that we listen to bluegrass, actually. We're listening to jazz, we're listening to sometimes classical, singer songwriters. And, we just don't listen. Don't get me wrong, we love bluegrass and always will. And we love listening to it, and we will always listen to it going down the road. At some point, it'll come on. We'll hear a banjo at some point. But a lot of times we're just trying to, relax going down the road or get inspiration from something else other than, just one source.
My bluegrass hero and my kind of introduction to bluegrass was Tony Rice, and he played up here four times in the early 2000s. Um, and I got to talk to him a bit about his interest in jazz. And, his musical heroes were John Coltrane and Oscar Peterson, Miles Davis. It wasn't really necessarily Bill Monroe or Ralph Stanley or Jimmy Martin. He loved those people
Right.
and played it and sang it
Of
beautifully. But
course.
in his basement, listening room, he was listening to other stuff, which I think,
Yes.
which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I always admired
Yeah.
that.
I think that's so important to just getting back to that old good music is good music thing.
Right,
I
right.
love that.
So I'm listening to some Texas fiddle. I'm not really that familiar with Texas fiddle music. I wasn't, but I've been listening to a bunch of it, and the tunes seem very complicated melodies, very precise. Like you really have to practice them and learn them exactly right. And then you do all this
Yes.
practice, and then you're up for 4 minutes, and it's all done. That must be a crazy, like all these hundreds of hours of practice to learn it exactly right, and then boom, you're done with it at the contest, right?
Yeah. That's when you put it like that, it seems a little stressful. Um Yeah, so Weezer, the National Fiddle Championship, is structured that way, where you get 4 minutes to perform three tunes. And so not only do you have to practice these tunes a lot for just one performance, but most of these tunes, I mean, if 4 minutes divided by three songs, that's about 1 minute and 15 seconds for each song, to still leave you a couple of seconds of downtime, like if you're out of tune, or, you don't want to just work up your tunes to be exactly 4 minutes, because maybe you got to scratch your nose in between a song, maybe. So not only are you having to practice these tunes a lot before the competition where you only just play them once. But you have to cut them up too. You have to shorten them so that they fit into that time frame, and that's kind of sad. But you know, you've got 70 people competing, and you kind of have to feel for the judges a little bit too. They, you know, every person can't play a 10-minute little set.
I know in the history of bluegrass, lots of musicians worked other jobs early on. I mean, Del McCrory worked in the lumber business, and Monroe was farming, and yada yada. Is that still true for younger musicians? I know you were a teacher. Are you still a teacher?
I do not teach anymore. I taught high school biology for 5 years, and all of that time I was playing music as well. I joined East Nash Grass in 2018, and that was the summer after my first year of teaching. So every Monday night, I would drive from Murfreesboro, where I lived at the time, which is about 45 minutes. And I would play Dee's Lounge with East Nash Grass. And we did that for 7 years. And so only a couple of those years was I not traveling back and forth to Murfreesboro. And I would get home and then go to bed and go teach kids the next day. And that was starting the work week off too. It's like, so I would, you know, Monday was my kind of, I looked forward to Mondays, which was really, really nice because Mondays normally are just such a drag. But I really looked forward to the Mondays because, and Tuesdays became the drag days because I was always tired and trying to be a good sport about it. But, you know, so yes, I think for a lot of folks, it is true that you do maybe two jobs for a little while. And, you know, and I'm so thankful for my time that I spent as a high school teacher. I mean, I made some incredible friends. My coworkers were just amazing. It was awesome to get to work with kids. And, you know, not everyone loved biology. And I tried to make it fun, but bless those kids, a lot of them didn't want to be in my class. They didn't want to be learning about biology, but I tried to do the best that I could and make it, again, accessible for everyone. And, you know, so and I was able to, it helped me save some money too, you know, having two jobs. And so I feel like that put me in a good spot to make the leap of faith in 2022. After 5 years of teaching, I was able to just kind of hope for the best. And so far it's been working out really great. And I'm just thankful to everybody that's helped me along the way, you know, and been supportive and been encouraging. You know, there's a time where I would have never even dreamed that I would quit my day job. Is, you know, my dad was such a hard worker for his entire life, and he, you know, faithfully did a day job for 39 years and as a biologist, and so I have that, you know, his work ethic is still always incredible. And so I never kind of thought that I wouldn't work a day job like that. But I'm, you know, thankful that ended up in a spot where I could take that leap of faith, and I had people encouraging me to do that and say, hey, you know, you can do this. Like, you can do this full time. And, you know, it's a work in progress. We'll see what happens. But so
Yeah. I mean, I guess if you're a young musician, especially in bluegrass or in Nashville area, at some point you either have to take the leap of faith or not. I mean, if you're gonna, you know, you might be happy just being a side person for some, or playing some studio stuff once in a while and working a second job. But I think most people I've talked to are motivated to want to do something on their own and see if it's going to work.
Yeah. I I was in a position, and my coworkers knew that I played fiddle and, was traveling a lot, and that was really where my heart was at. And they would just encourage me and say, Maddie, get out while you can. Like, you don't want to. That was not exactly verbatim, but a lot of my coworkers felt like they had put in too much time to be able to just leave at that point. And they had been there for 15 years, and they were however many years away from retirement. They were just going to stick it out. Uh, and that makes total sense. But they were like, Maddie, this is year 5 for you. Like, you can, like, just think about it. And I was like, yeah, that's. And then I had my musician friends being like, come on, come on. So it's
Yeah, they want to get you out, right? Yeah.
So, but I also, working a day job is I commend everyone that does do that, and it's necessary, and teachers are so necessary. And not to say that I'll never teach again in a public, school setting, but maybe I won't.
Did you ever bring your fiddle into biology class just to show off anything, or make a lesson, or have fun, or no?
Not really. There were a couple
No.
times I would perform for like the senior talent show, or uh but I always played music for them during the day. Like, and I would have a new artist every day. Every day we were listening to music, and I would write who we were listening to up on the board, and I'd play bluegrass for them. Uh, I would play all kinds of stuff for them and just try to expose. I mean, I know it's a biology class, but I was trying to expose my kiddos to good music. I was seeing 130 kids plus per day, and we listened to John Coltrane sometimes. And sometimes they'd be like, Miss Denton, can you turn that up? That's really good. I'd be like, huh? Yeah, I can. Or if they would get in trouble, and they're getting on my nerves, I'd cut the music off. And that they hated that. They were like, Miss Denton, don't take the tunes away. And I was like, well, you're talking too much. I can't, like, the music is like a treat to be enjoyed.
Earn it, right? You have to kind of earn your music privilege, I guess.
Yeah. And they appreciated that. They appreciated getting to hear music, even though they would have never have picked a lot of what I picked. But it was always nice when they would recognize something, like if I played George Strait and they were like, oh, that's that All My Exes Live in Death. And I'm like, yeah, what's you know that. Now here's some of his other songs that are also really good,
Interesting, yeah. I know you play with Dan Tyminski's band. For how long have you been doing that?
So I joined Dan Tyminski's band in 2020, and that was a huge highlight of my musical life. Because Dan has been someone that I've looked up to, and I still do. And it's, playing alongside him for 4 years was something that was, I will always treasure that. And I actually, Harry and I both played with Dan and East Nash Grass, and actually beginning in 2025, we're only playing with East Nash Grass. So we're not playing with Dan anymore, but we actually did see his new band last night at a festival. Well, gosh, that wasn't last night. It was recently. I don't know how time passes these days. A couple days ago, we saw him and his new band at the Music City Bluegrass and Roots Festival, I think was what it was called. It was a first-year festival in Maryland, and it was really great. And Dan Tyminski was the headliner, and we watched him, and the new band sounds great. He's got Aaron Ramsey on mandolin and Nathan Aldridge on fiddle, and they just sound so good. And it was such a treat to hear them. Um, but yeah, I spent 4 years with Dan, and I just got to the point where I couldn't, you know, do both anymore without hurting someone. And I don't want to hurt anybody and or keep anyone out of work or whatever. And so we just ended up going with East Nash Grass. But will treasure playing with Dan forever.
What about him? Would you say you admire most, or what about? I mean, no, I know Dan Tyminski. He's been on the podcast. I've talked to him about stuff. I've heard his music forever, and he's obviously a major talent. But what is it about him that you particularly were drawn to, or are drawn to?
And I listened to his Wheels album
Mm.
religiously.
Mhm.
Every morning when I was in high school, my mom would make grits and eggs for breakfast before I went to school, and we would listen to the Wheels album. And I just loved his voice. I he's like one of my all-time favorite bluegrass singers. Um, and I loved his guitar playing. He is so groovy, and you can just kind of always tell that it's him. And of course, for a long time, he played with one of my biggest heroes, Alison Krauss. Um, I've listened to a lot of Alison Krauss's fiddle playing, and she's inspired me so much. Um, Talk about somebody who's groovy, and you can always tell that it's her. I mean, she has her own style on the fiddle, and I have just looked up to her so much, and she's just one of my favorites. And and he got to play with her for a long time, and so that was another thing that drew me to him, because obviously he's playing guitar for one of my big heroes. And so just the combination of all that, it was just kind of the perfect. I just looked up to him so much. He's just one of my favorite musicians, and he still is. I love to hear him.
I'm going back to when you started learning about bluegrass and trying to play it, and you were having trouble. What was it about bluegrass that you struggled with at the beginning? Because you were obviously you knew your way around the fiddle. You had a good ear. You could play melody. You could play swing, Texas stuff. What was it about bluegrass that you found to be a challenge at first? Can you
You
answer
know,
specifically what
so
that might be?
yeah, so a lot of what I had been doing with the fiddle up until that time was like we talked about a few minutes ago. You work up these tunes, you practice them, you play them the same way every time, you perfect that. And it's almost a type, not really, but it seems a little bit like a classical type of practice of like learning these tunes, memorizing these songs, and performing them, you know, at, just reciting them basically in front of the judges. It's like almost a recital. Um, and that's just not how it is in bluegrass at all. And so I was immediately kind of forced out onto this limb that I felt pretty shaky standing out on that limb. And especially when you add in like, oh, we're going to play this in B flat. It's like, what? What do you mean? And a lot of times we can get away with not using our fourth finger in these open tuning like D, A, G songs. And now we're in B flat. We're in E flat sometimes. We're in F. All of these new keys, and it's like, oh, it's just it's a whole different range of motion. Like swimmers doing all the different types of like I don't know why that just came into my head immediately, but there's all types of different ways to swim, and like it's totally different. Just playing the different genres on the fiddle, it's totally different muscle movements and understanding. So it was just, and it was something that I was having some success at these fiddle contests at just performing my tunes. Uh, and I was not at the same level playing bluegrass as I was playing Texas contest style. And that really got in my head. And I was intimidated by all these people that were so much better than me at this thing. And here I am, Maddie's supposed to be good at fiddle, but she is just falling all over herself in the key of B. And that deterred me for a long time because I'm such a perfectionist. I didn't want anyone to hear me play bad, but uh, I just had to get past that. And once I understood a little bit of the procedure of like, okay, this is how bluegrass is different than Texas contest style, and I was able to separate them a little bit, and I was able to give myself a little bit of grace of like, hey, you're doing a brand new thing, and you're not expected to be really good at it immediately, And I sometimes fall into this mindset of like, if I'm not immediately good at it, I don't want to do it. But that's insane because it's human nature to have to learn how to do something, and that's perfectly okay. So
I get
I
that. I'm
think
a
I was,
perfectionist too. I have the same attitude towards stuff. If I can't do it right away, I'm not going to do it. And you're right. It's a stupid attitude and it's self-defeating. But if you're a perfectionist
yeah,
and like to be doing things well all the time, that's the way you think about stuff. I was thinking about
yeah,
you mentioned a recital, and that's a good term because classical music, you learn the piece and you recite it exactly as you learned it. And ironically, in classical music, as I'm sure you know, there used to be a lot of improvising and concertos and things where you'd have a whole place where the fiddle player, violin player would do a whole improvised cadenza for 5 minutes, or even piano, stuff. And that's kind of gone out of classical music. I think that you're expected to just follow the notes. And I know in my experience up here playing with different bluegrass fiddlers, most of whom went to Yale School of Music and are classical players, it
hmm
was so hard for them to unlearn everything they were doing in bluegrass was exactly the opposite of what they were taught to do in classical music.
yes,
The slides and the bends and the slurs and the double stops and all this stuff and the blues notes. This was like against all of their training since they were four, and it's very hard for people to change to do
yes,
that.
it
It's
is.
so different, and your mind is totally in that way, and then to do something totally different, especially being a perfectionist, I can see why it would freak you out. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's I took some classical lessons in college from the classical violin instructor that was there, Dr. Andrea Dawson, and that was a real learning curve. I initially went to see her because I was having a lot of pain in actually in my hands, and it was to the point where I was having a hard time. I was actually practicing my songs to go to Weezer, the National Fiddle Contest, and having to play for 4 minutes, pretty much not stopping, three tunes for 4 minutes, and I couldn't do it. I was in too much pain to even play for 4 minutes without stopping, and I didn't compete that year at Weezer. I was like, I can't do this. I'm in too much pain. And that next semester, I I took private lessons with Dr. Dawson for pain. I was like, I need help. And she actually set me up with this it's a tall chin rest because I have kind of a giraffe neck. And what had been happening was I was having to contort my body in a weird, in my neck and have weird a weird way of holding it because my neck was so long that I was having to stretch it just to be comfortable playing the fiddle. And so now I have this kind of extra tall chin rest and the proper shoulder rest, and she helped straighten that out. And it was so incredible that the pain in my hands went away when I got my neck situated. So really, it was just neck problems, but it radiated down into my hands. And so I'm so thankful to her for helping me with my technique and making me learn some classical music, because learning the classical music helped me out in with everything else. It's amazing how working on one area of your music helps in all the rest of them. Even it seeps into the rest of your playing. And that's why I think it's so important to listen to other types of music and be influenced by everyone.
And bluegrass solo, the most you would ever play in a bluegrass song is probably like 30, 40 seconds at a time. You would never play 4 minutes straight in a bluegrass song, probably.
Right.
I mean,
Not as a fiddle player.
No, you might be chopping and doing fills, but you're not playing, hard melodic stuff, stretches
Right.
and all this stuff for straight for 4 minutes. Whereas a classical player might play straight for, I don't know, for 40
18.
or 50. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't think people realize how important it is to be relaxed, because you could be a bluegrass fiddler and play 30-second solos your whole life and never have a physical problem. But as you said, when you play 4 minutes of Texas fiddle tunes, you realize you have a physical problem, and it's going to impact you, especially as you get older. These bad habits or whatever physical irregularities of your body that everyone's different. Playing real. I remember listening to Brian Sutton talk about this, how important it is that if your fingers are tight, then your wrist is tight, then your arm is tight, your shoulder is tight, your whole body tightens right up, and you can't play.
Yeah.
You might be able to think you can play, but when you're tight, you really can't play.
Man, and that's something I've realized recently. I was trying to learn harmony to one of Sammy Brayman's songs. Sammy released this awesome fiddle record a couple years ago of all original tunes that she wrote. And I was having a show at Dee's, just a Maddie show. I'd put a band together and I was figuring out what to do. And I asked Sammy if she wanted to get up and play a tune with me. I was like, I would love to play harmony with you on one of your tunes. And let's do some twin fiddle, because I love playing twin fiddle. That's something that is so fun to me. I love playing harmony, especially. But so I just thought it'd be a treat to get Sammy up, because she's so good, so groovy. And so I invited her up to play one of her tunes with me at Dee's, but I had to learn that harmony part. And I realized, because the notes didn't lay in an easy way on the fiddle, on the fingerboard. So I was having to, and I'm so glad that this happened, but I realized when I was having trouble with my left hand, that my right hand was super tense and locked up and then I realized that I could actually play better with my left hand if I focused on my right hand being loose. So when I was focusing actually on my right hand being loose and removing the tension that was in my right hand, my left hand knew what to do. It knew what to do, and I didn't have to think about that. But because my right hand was so locked up, and when I was trying to learn that part, I couldn't do anything. And it's so counterintuitive that your right hand having tension would like overtake your brain and also cause your left hand to not work either. So it's kind of the right hand was the problem.
It kind of makes sense. I mean, when you think about it, because everything's connected. If you make a fist in your left hand, your right hand's probably going to be doing something too. I mean, it's not totally separate. It's interesting because I was talking to Richard Green, the famous fiddle player with, Grisman and all those people, about this, and he learned classical fiddle. He's on my podcast. It's interesting, his comments, but he said, I learned classical fiddle. I hated it. And then when I heard, what's his name? Stoneman, the fiddle players, not Sammy. Scotty Stoneman. He said, I heard I saw him play, and he said, it blew my mind. It completely blew my mind that anybody could do that. And he said, I realized that when I'm playing the fiddle, classical fiddle, and my right hand is up, he said, I just dropped my right hand down by my side, relaxed it. And my left hand too, I dropped it down, and I was a totally different fiddle player after that. I was so used to being controlled. And he said, when I saw Scotty Stoneman, I said, that is crazy stuff, but it's the best stuff I've ever heard, he said. And that was his aha moment. But he said that relaxing of both arms down led him to be able to play the fiddle like, the bluegrass fiddle as opposed to classical. It's interesting.
Yeah. And I think the audience can also pick up on tension. Yeah. And I just, you want the audience to be relaxed when they're listening to you play. And I'm not the best at this at all. And I still catch myself feeling super tense on stage. And I'm like, Maddie, just relax. Like, it's all fine. But I think it comes across to the audience when you're tense as well. And, I think as entertainers, it's our job to make sure the audience is, as relaxed and comfortable as possible and within reason. And, just play to them. And tension just creeps into things so easily. And I think it's something that we constantly will have to work around and remember to remove.
I was talking to Michael Cleveland on the podcast last year, and he said that he still struggles mightily with intonation, especially on double stop. Said, I'm always struggling. I was thinking to myself, how could that be? You're struggling. Yeah. How could you be struggling? I mean, you're the best fiddler I ever heard. But he said, oh, I'm constantly struggling with intonation. Is that just a problem because of the nature of the fiddle and the wood and no frets, and it's just hard to always find the exact place you want to be?
Yeah, intonation is really tough, and hearing pitch sometimes it's harder sometimes than other times to hear pitch. Sometimes it's more difficult to hear it correctly, especially in the studio. Don't know why, but there have been times in the studio where I'm playing something and I'll listen back and it's flat. Every bit of it is flat, and it's like, whoa, do I just play flat all the time? And then so pitch is difficult sometimes. But also I love not having frets, and it's more of a beautiful thing than it is a curse to not have frets, because you can just sing it with your instrument. It's I would think one of the closest instruments to the voice, the actual voice, that is in bluegrass. Dobro is similar, but I just fiddle. You can just sing whatever you want to play, and I love that. And that's another beautiful thing, is if you're not totally in tune, you can get there. Like within a fraction of a second. It's like, woo, that wasn't right. Slide up a little. Okay, now it's there.
You can make adjustments, whereas a fretted instrument, you have to stop and tune it. You really can't change the pitch much,
right,
while you're playing.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I've asked. I was talking to Larry Sparks about playing guitar solos. He said, when I play a solo, I'm singing the tune on my guitar. I'm singing the lyrics on my guitar. That's what I'm thinking of. I'm not thinking about the tempo or the chords. I'm thinking about the lyric of the song, and that's what I'm trying to play with my lead, with my solo. I thought that was kind of a nice way of looking at it, because obviously there's a million things you can think about when you're soloing. That there's all these things going on: the band, the crowd, the noise, the heat, your fatigue level, all the the key, the speed, blah blah blah. And yet he said, I just think about the lyrics.
That is something that I learned from Gavin Largent, fantastic dobro player who plays with Dan Tyminski, and he played a lot with East Nash Grass too. And so he and I got to work together very closely because our two instruments serve the same purpose. We are color adding instruments, the fiddle and the dobro. We're not necessarily inherently part of the rhythm section. You've got mandolin on the offbeat, you got bass on the downbeat, you've got banjo kind of subdividing all of that, and then you've got guitar that's just this presence that kind of is a pillow for it all. And so there's not a lot of room necessarily for fiddle or dobro to be trying to add to the rhythm section. So we're the color adding instruments, and we had to work together to create colors behind the lyrics of the songs. And he is always listening to the lyrics. And I think the good players do. They want to honor the song. If it's a kind of happy song, you don't want to just kind of play a solo that doesn't fit a happy mood and the happy lyrics, or vice versa. You want to honor the song and play the melody. That's something that of course, when you're just starting out, you learn all these melodies. And then part of growth as a musician is learning how to go away from the melody. But I think an even further growth as a musician is so once you know how to go away from the melody, I think it's important even further to know how to come back to it. And, simple, the more I learn, the more I realize that simple is really nice to listen to. And I'm not the best at doing that. I still have a long way to go at just honoring the song. But I think that's, what Larry Sparks was talking to you about too, is just, and you have to listen to the lyrics and know what the song is about in order to honor it properly.
It's funny because, one definition of bluegrass to me is like happy music, sad lyrics. There's so many songs that are, bouncing along, but you just killed your girlfriend and threw her in the river and cut her off. It's insane. So it's, I guess it is a challenge to capture the mood of a lyric sometimes in a bouncy bluegrass song that's not really a happy song.
Right.
I'm just thinking about Banks of the Ohio, or these songs, they're kind of bounced along, but yet the message of the lyrics is pretty brutal and dark.
Yeah.
Especially in more historic. Now bluegrass maybe is not quite as, I guess there are not as many bluegrass players, young players killing their girlfriends and throwing them in the river like they used to. But the history of bluegrass, there's a lot of that. A lot of the songs are very, very murderous and dark. Interesting.
Yeah. In East Nash Grass, we really don't do too many of those songs because, largely, I think another part of honoring or serving a song is trying to understand where the writer was coming from when they wrote that song and being able to relate to it. And so traditionally, East Nash Grass has really not done too many murder ballady type songs just because we don't know how to relate to that. And we want to sing songs that are relatable for us and for the audience. And we would like to think that our audience probably can't relate to those murder ballads either. I guess we don't know, but
yeah, the older crowd probably does because that's what they grew up with. But younger bluegrass players and fans probably can't relate to that. I think it's really old-fashioned, outdated songs, which a lot of them are. They're a lot of them are 70, 80 years old. They're
they're great
time.
Songs. Yeah, it's just like you want to be able to understand where the song's coming from, I guess, at a deep level. And I surely do not have that ability to understand at a deep level because I've never I've never killed anybody.
You've never been thrown in the river or killed anybody. I know.
Right. So
good for you. That's probably a good thing.
Yeah.
So if you could have sat down and played music with anybody in music history, who would that be? If you could just say, go back in time and sit down on the couch with your fiddle and sing and
Oh
play with
man,
one person, it's a hard question because there's probably a million.
that is a hard question, and I'm going to give the most non-conventional answer ever, I think. But I think it would be Sting, actually, for me. Sting is my favorite artist of all time, and I know all the songs. I would I would absolutely in a heartbeat sit down with that guy and play
Wow.
his songs. Now,
Hmm.
I there are so many bluegrass folks that I would sit down with as well, but you said one, and so
Oh, I mean,
that's my
yeah.
one.
Okay. Fair enough. That's a good choice. I can see the appeal there. Yeah, he is a genius and a beautiful singer, songwriter, and bass player all at the same time. He's amazing.
Yeah, his
Amazing guy.
songs, his songs to me have the power. It's like, did you write that song because you were living in my brain and knowing my thoughts? Like, it seems his songs are just so powerful. And it's like, wow, you just put to words and put to music. You made kind of a soundtrack of my thoughts. But I know that so many people can relate to his songs. But yeah, I just think he's a prolific songwriter, and I do have to say that I saw him last year at Bourbon and Beyond. He was headlining the same day that East Nash Grass was playing that festival, and I he played all the songs that I loved, and it was just I never thought that I would get to see him. I don't know why I thought that, but he just seemed like someone that I would never get to see. And then I got to see him, and he played a lot of my favorite songs. Not all of them, but I have so many favorite songs that of his. It's how could he play it all in a 75-minute set? But anyway, so that was very cool. And thank you, Bourbon and Beyond, for getting Sting on the same day as East Nash Grass.
It's pretty nice. Yeah, that's pretty nice for you.
I
So
definitely bought a T-shirt with both of our
uh,
names on it.
excellent
So
to prove that it happened. Yeah.
it happened. Yes.
So if you had a music podcast called the Maddie Denton Music Show, who would you want your first guest to be? If you could do a podcast, like I'm doing a podcast, my
Ooh.
first guest was actually Bronwyn Keith Hines because I knew her. She'd played up here a lot, and I thought it would just be cool to start off with her. Um,
Yeah, that's a
so
great choice.
who would you
Um,
who would you choose in the bluegrass? Anybody? I mean, you probably get them on your show too, but
anyone in bluegrass.
I thought I'd limit it to bluegrass. I mean, I could say anyone in music, but that might be even harder to find. Well, I guess you'd want to have Sting on, but
Oh,
yeah.
gosh. Well, you know, I'm I'm a huge Stuart Duncan fan. So to be able to like chat with Stuart and pick his brain um would be would be such a treat. Um oh gosh. That's such a hard question. There's so many. I mean, obviously you would want to have like I mean, are you would want to get Bill Monroe, and like the founders, if that was on the table, you would, but I don't know if that's on the table.
No, let's say there's no
Um,
time machine. This is just, people who
no
might
time.
might go
Okay,
on a podcast now to talk to you for an hour about whatever.
okay, that's an important clarification because thinking about all of the founders
Uh,
was giving me a hard time.
mhm.
Yeah, if it's just right now, I think Stuart would be a great first interview on my podcast because he, like I mentioned earlier, I had folks kind of encouraging me to quit my job and, like do music full time. But it wasn't until Harry Clark and I were going down the road listening to um, a Jim Mills album that Stuart Duncan played fiddle on. And this was December of 2021. And I heard Stuart's fiddle break on Bound to Ride. And I was like, wait a second. Back that up. Let's have that again. And I listened to it again. And I was like, Harry, I think that's like the best fiddle solo I've ever heard.
Yeah.
And it was just the melody. He played the melody. And he just did it in such a way that right then and there, hearing that recording, I was like, this is what I want to do with my life, is like try to chase this and invest my time into music and making people feel something, and just helping people through. I don't know, music is so important. And it was after listening to that Stuart Duncan fiddle solo, among other things, but that was like final straw. I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And then that was December of 21. And then in the spring of 22, I put in my notice, and they would send out a little sheet of paper that everybody had to fill out. Like, are you returning next year? Are you retiring next year? Or are you resigning next year? And every year up until that point, I'd check the I am returning box. But then I checked the I will be resigning box. And I cried and turned it in. But
yeah. Well, it's probably the best thing you did in your life.
Well, I hope so, but
Yeah.
I wasn't definitely not wasting my time doing what I was doing, but I love this so much.
Yeah.
So I'm very happy.
I think Stuart Duncan would enjoy hearing you retell that story if you had a. That's a nice, everybody likes to hear something like that you actually changed somebody's trajectory of their life by just some thing you played or did. It's nice to be recognized for that. I'm sure he would enjoy that.
Yeah, he just mesmerized me with that solo, and I was like, you know what? And it's not that I hadn't heard Stuart Duncan before,
Sure,
but
sure.
somehow I had not heard that Jim Mills record before.
Yeah.
And so I was just hearing everything, and Dan Tyminski was on there. Adam Steffi was on there, who I got to play with Adam for a couple years when we were all in the Dan Tyminski band together, and that was such a treat. Ricky Skaggs was on there. It's just such a great record, and I'd never heard it before, and so I was just going down the road, and Harry had shown it to me, and we were listening, and it's like, dang it, this is what I have to do.
I haven't heard that record either, honestly. So I guess I'll have to listen to it.
You gotta check it out.
You gotta check it out. So right now you're playing with East Nash Grass. That's your full-time gig, right? That's your main focus. Are you gonna, at some point, do you think, have your own band and tour, or is that just you're gonna stay with what you got right now with this band? Do you think?
Yeah. For the foreseeable future, it's East Nash Grass, and the cool thing about East Nash is that it's all of our things. We're all part owners of it, and we decide what we do or don't do, or we're all kind of joint frontmen of that band in some way, and we all have some ownership of it, and so that kind of satisfies my my hankering to be a front man. I don't, maybe if in the future, but right now I'm kind of co-front man with everybody in East Nash Grass, and it's a project that we've all done together, and I love that so much about it. It's the thing that drew me to East Nash Grass is that we could do it together. So right now, super content in that, and we've got a new album that'll be coming out in August, and it's a bunch of original songs and some covers, but like way back covers that are going to seem hopefully kind of fresh, and some just random and songs that our friends wrote. And it's just, I'm really, really excited about it. Last Chance to Win, our last record, I loved, and I think I love this next one more, because it's mostly originals, and everybody's just writing so well, and we're all getting inspired by different things and then bringing those things together. And we've got a traditional Liberian chant that Brenna actually brought to us, and I kind of helped her rearrange this traditional Liberian chant, and it's on the East Nash Grass record, and we're excited about that. So, East Nash will be releasing singles once a month until August, in preparation for this album. So we just released Following You, which James Key, our guitar player, wrote with Christian Ward, who now plays fiddle for Del McCoury and Traveling McCourys. He writes a lot, and Harry and Corey and Christian have been writing a lot, and several of those songs will be on our record, and it's just really exciting. And we've got our show at the Ryman, we're co-headlining with AJ Lee and Blue Summit on July 15th. So we've got some cool things coming up. Rocky Grass, also in July, and just things are going pretty well.
Glad to hear that. I'm not surprised knowing who's in that band, that you're in it. I know Corey and Chris. Corey's played up here with Sierra Hall, as did Christian Ward at one point back in the day.
Yeah.
So, well, this is, we're well over an hour now. I think it's a good place to stop. I have another hour's worth of things to ask you, but I'm not going to do it. we're going to cut it here. It's been wonderful talking to you. I wish you all the best. I hope you bring your band up here sometime to New England, maybe. I don't know what your plans are for that, but it'll be.
I think we're coming back at some point this year.
Yeah.
We were there in March.
Right. I remember.
But we'll be back, I think, in November, which I'm concerned that I'm going to just freeze, but I guess I'll deal with it.
You never know. November, it could be snow or it could be 60 degrees. It's hard to predict up here.
Yeah.
But anyway, well, thank you again, Maddie, for coming on the show.
Thanks
it's been
for
fun
having
talking
me.
to you, and good luck with everything. Good luck with the record and the tour and everything else.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And I really appreciate the opportunity to get on here and chat with you. It's been real nice. Okay.
Well, I'm going to stop it now. Thanks again.
All right. Thanks.
Yep. Bye.
All right. Bye.
I hope you enjoyed our podcast, and thanks for listening. Visit our website, guitartownct.com, for concert and podcast schedules, or just to send us a message. We'd love to hear from you.